licking their lips. Why is licking your lips so important? For several weeks, I have been reading The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, the first in a 14-novel series, even more ambitious than the saga that we intend to write.
Yes.
Probably the most ambitious saga that I'm aware of. And later in this video, I'm going to share one thing that I really like about Robert Jordan's style and another thing that I find a little bit annoying. But first, just a little bit of an update of what we've been doing in our own novel since the last time we talked. How about you go ahead and share first what you've been doing?
All right. I have been working on a scene where our main character is conversing with his parents, or one parent, we haven't really decided yet, about some information that he has learned, and getting their reactions to that, and then his reactions to their reactions. And there have been some interesting things that we're trying to work through in that, as far as what information we want to get out in that scene. And so next week in our spoiler video, we'll look a little bit more into what we're thinking through in that scene.
And my focus has been on continuing the short narrative that we talked about last week. It's a separate, almost a separate side story.
Mm-hmm.
But really focusing on just trying to complete the beginning, middle, end. I've been able to identify which of the threads I really want to focus on for this story. Now it's been about getting the words down, getting the words out. Reading back through it, it does feel a little bit chunky, clunky, bumpy, wordy.
But it's a first draft.
It is I'll call it a second draft.
Okay.
So
I was trying to be generous.
I appreciate that. But so that's what we've been working on. But I wanted to share, in addition to the work that we're doing trying to write, we're also trying to keep up with our reading. So Robert Jordan's Eye of the World, just a couple of quick things. One thing that I see that he's done really, really well, and that I would want the skill to emulate, is how, at least in the area that I'm in right now, you can see how far my bookmark is gone. I'm at the point now where the group of main characters have, against their will, been split into 3 factions that don't know where each other are. And I like the way that he spends a chapter or 4 talking about what's happening with one group. And then he switches and spends a chapter or 4 talking about what's happening with another group. And it lets you just enough keep up with what's going on with each set, while still leaving some curiosity about, but what's happening over there with that other group. And just keeping that story flowing is something that I think he's done really well.
And that reminds me of a few different stories. I know I mentioned 2 before we started filming this, but I'm thinking 3 now.
Oh boy.
It really reminds me of Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Because you've got the Fellowship that all start out together and then very quickly get split up into a couple different groups that are all going around their own path, and some of them don't know where each other are. And it's very similar there. Also reminds me a little bit of Star Wars, how when you're starting out in the very first scene of the movie, the first characters you meet are R2-D2 and C-3PO. And then from them you meet Princess Leia, and then they leave, and from them you meet Luke. And so then you've got these 2 characters that you've met through a character that you had already known. And you follow them throughout, and then you meet other characters. But every character you meet in that movie, you meet through a character that you have already met. The only exception, of course, being the characters you meet at the very beginning. But there's that trail that you follow through, and then that kind of splits off, and you follow that story. And then the story that I'm thinking of that is basically the exact opposite of that strategy is the Redwall series. I used to read the Redwall series, a lot of those books, when I was back in middle school. But they were basically the exact opposite, where they would start out the book talking about this group over here, and you'd talk about them for a couple chapters, or maybe just one, and then you would talk about this group over here that's completely new and has absolutely no connection. And then sometimes you talk about a third group that completely new, no connection. And then as the story goes on, those 3 groups eventually get together, and in the climax, it culminates with all of them together, and you see how the storyline that you followed for each one ties into what's happening at the very end.
And is that the pattern for each book in the series?
I don't know if every book is like that, but I know a lot of them are.
So that kind of a pattern really demands that the author has built up a lot of trust, I think, so that when you see yourself, I don't even know who these people are, where do these people come from, that you trust that they're going to bring them together.
I now that you say that, I think some of the earlier books in the series didn't necessarily follow that pattern, but some of the later ones did. So like you said, they're building that trust.
Interesting.
And with the earlier ones that aren't as all over the place in the beginning.
And when you were describing the pattern of Star Wars and how you learn of characters through other characters, and how I think we learned about that, you said, in a video called "How Star Wars Was Saved in the Edit."
Yes.
And I maybe we can share a link to that video if we can find it again. But what's interesting to me is that as he was writing, even as they were filming, as he put together the first draft of the actual product, they had things in a different order. And that's one of the things that I like about the way that we're organizing our story.
Yes.
We're treating each scene as a separate thing, and we have the freedom and flexibility to move it around as we learn and figure things out.
Yeah.
So that was good feedback, reflection on that and how it relates to other stories that we're familiar with. The other thing that I've noticed in Eye of the World that I find a little more annoying, something I do not necessarily want to replicate, is Robert Jordan seems to have this fascination with people licking their lips, or wanting to lick their lips, or not wanting to lick their lips, or waiting to lick their lips. And I see no reason for so many people, so many different characters, to be obsessed with licking their lips. Why is licking your lips so important? I just don't follow that. And I'm guessing, I shouldn't say I'm guessing. If I were generous, I would say maybe, well, I'll get to the end of the book or the end of the series, and I'll say, oh, it was significant. And maybe viewers or listeners out there have read the series and, oh, just wait, it's all a big Easter egg. You'll see why it's so significant. But right now, I'm not seeing that.
I think licking lips, it can be helpful in moderation, or having that in the book can be helpful in moderation. There we go. Clarify that there.
On the count of 3, let's all lick our lips.
No, let's not. But it helps you get into the mind of that character. What are they thinking? It also acts as something to display the passing of a little bit of time. But I think there are other ways to do that besides just talking about licking lips.
Yeah, it doesn't really tell me much about what they're thinking, other than I can see it as a tool to communicate that there is discomfort, and they want to do something to relieve that discomfort. Personally, I would prefer to see more metaphors of, more symbols of discomfort than it always being licking lips.
Cracking knuckles, fidgeting in seat. They're
right. Or
shifting weight from one leg to the other if you're standing.
Scratching an itch, stretching,
right.
Craning your neck, something like that, to find a little bit more variety. But every time I see it now, I go, really? Again? You're licking their lips again? Anyway, so those are the two things that I noticed about my reading from Robert Jordan's Eye of the World. Question for you today is, what is an idiosyncrasy that you have noticed in a respected author that grabs your attention in maybe the not most positive way? Let us know that in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.